guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is a very special one. We're gonna dupe or we're gonna find like a similar color story to the newest Shroud Cosmetics palette, which is in collaboration with our very own Battybean, and it is called their Hallobean eyeshadow palette. Now this palette launches on 6th of September at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this palette would be retailed at $42, but you can use Battybean's coupon code for saving like 10% off on top of it. I do not have personally a coupon code for Shroud Cosmetics, so if you guys are buying this palette, definitely use her code. I was planning to get this palette, and I might still go and get this palette, but I want to like see if I can find like a similar color story in my collection that I have, because I have a lot of palettes with me. So I started digging into the palettes, and not like one or two palettes cannot dupe this palette, because this has a beautiful color story, a grungy but like special shades. I really love the color story of this palette. So let's begin duping. The first shadow in the palette is called Ghastly, and this is like a cool tone purple but with like a hint of blue in it, but it's like super deep shade. And I love Battybean for that. If you guys have not like subscribed to her, or if you guys do not know who she is, I mean, where are you? I've been like a follower of her like for a very long time. I love the looks that she creates. So the first shade, I thought that it was very close to this shade, which is Cosmos from the Giant Wolf palette from Odin's Eye. Ignore my nails. Do not see it or do not comment on it. So I'm going to swatch this, and this is like a cool tone, very deep purple blue shade. And it's a 9-pan palette. I think she does such beautiful color story, even though it's like a 9-pan palette, but the colors that she chose, like you can create so much variety. I feel like this palette is like totally up my alley. Her first palette was more of the greens in it, and that is why I could skip on it, because I'm not a big green person. But this palette is like grungy jewel tones, perfect for Halloween, and I cannot wait. Like, you guys tell me how close have I been to this palette and whether I do need this palette in my collection or not. Okay, the next shade in the palette is called Afterlife, and I thought that that shade was very close to this shade, Potent, from my Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal palette. Now I know that the shade in her palette is more of like a duochrome, which shifts with like this rusty coppery shade to like a gold. So I thought I'm gonna layer Regal also. I feel like this by itself is very close to that shade. I like being very honest. So let me swatch this and you guys let me know. Let me just swatch the Potent shade by itself so that we see how we take it. I feel like this is so close, like so richly pigmented, and the shade is like very close to this. Like, look at that. I feel like, yes, she does have like a hint of gold flip to it, but this is very close. So I'm going to keep it at that. And once like you go out in the sunlight, and I'll show you these shades in the outside lighting too. I feel like once you go in the sunlight outside, you can see that coppery, like it has a slight shift to it, but it's really pretty. But if you want, like, you can definitely like layer a tiny little bit of Regal to it. So, do you want me to do that? A very tiny little bit of Regal to it, and it would give that like golden sheen to it. I really love this shade. Okay, let's move on. The next shade in the palette is called Crypt, and this is, she defines this as more of like a mustardy shade, but it definitely has a green in it. I would say it seems like very close to this Antipode shade from, again, Giant Wolf's palette. So I'm gonna swatch this. I personally felt when I saw her like swatch video, her reveal video, this was like very close to that shade. So I'm gonna swatch this. If you feel like this shade is like super grungy, which I think it is, I would mix in like a mustardy green shade too. And I think this would be very close. Makila Palette's Loop shade, this one. So let's actually mix that and see, because I feel like we might get a little more close to that. And I took like a very little amount, but I feel like the shade Antipode is going to be a little more closer. So I'm going to wipe that shade off and just apply antipode. So that's like antipode swatched again. Can you see? I feel like it's very, very close to that shade. Again, this one is finding like a similar shade from my collection to the shade Crypt. Now let's move on to the next row. The next shade in the palette is called Burrow, and as soon as I saw that shade, it's like a gold and a very bright orange like mixed together. I don't think I have anything in my collection that's similar to it. And then I thought of the first palette that Colourpop had, and that is the Yes Please palette. There's a very, very similar shade in this, which is very similar to that shade. And this is called Chauffeur. So I am actually going to swatch this shade. Now this is a very, very old palette. So I generally use this only for swatching. I do not apply this on my eyes, but the shade is very, very similar. So I'm going to swatch that. And yeah, I feel like this is so close. Now, of course, this is Colourpop and that is Shroud. So it's going to be a little different. But can you see that like bright orange golden shifty shade? Like it's really, really pretty. And so apt for this palette, I would say. Now let's move on to the next shade. The next shadow in the palette is called It's Showtime, and this is the brightest green of the palette, which like completely acquires the attention as soon as you see that palette. And I would say that shade is very, very close to this green olive shade from the Dirty Martini palette from Glamlight. So I'm going to swatch that. Yeah, it's a very smooth and punchy shade, I would say. It's a very slime green shade in a matte formula. So that's how it looks. How pretty is that? Like, oh my God, I will stay away from it because I do not wear those greens on my eyes. But with the other shade, it looks so, so pretty. Especially if you're a green lover, I think you will absolutely love it. Now let's move on to the next shade. The next shade in the palette is called Black Flame, and this is a black based multichrome, my favorite shadow in that palette, I would say. And that I'm duping or like getting close to this shade, which is called Hop Along from the MILF palette from Sugar Drizzle. Now as you can see, it is like a purple shade, but it has like that green flip to it. It's very, very pretty, very pretty. So let's watch that. I love this shade. Like this is definitely one among my favorite shades that I have in my collections. Look how smooth it is and how pigmented it is. Like, let me swatch it. I feel like I can see so much of purple. You might be seeing a lot of green. I don't know. See, you see a lot of green, but I see like that purple shade. Can you see that? It's such a pretty shade. Very, very pretty. I love this shade. Ooh, so exciting. So exciting. The next shade in the palette is called Losers Club, and this is like a matte burnt orange shade. And as soon as I saw that shade, I knew that this like dupes this shade, which is a pumpkin spice shade from the Dominique Cosmetics Latte palette. You know how much I love this. So this definitely like reminded me of that shade, like without a doubt. So let's watch that. Such a pretty shade. Look at that. So pretty. I'm bare-eyed because I really want to create like look with it and I cannot wait. The next shade in the palette is called Goldish. Goldish? I think it's goldish. Now this shadow is like a iridescent multichrome shade is what she says. Now it looks like a white in the pan, but it has like that golden sheen running throughout it. So if you're looking for that like white gold effect, I think this shade Astral from the Giant Folds palette is very, very close to it. But she also mentioned that that shade does have like a green, like a light lime green sheen running throughout that shade. So then I thought of like picking up my MILF palette, and that has a similar shade, which is Camouflage here, and this has like a lot of green in it, if you can see. But again, it is like a white gold shade, or else we have a lot of shade like that. My newest like ethereal palette from Gourmand Girls has a very similar shade which is called Pure, and this is also like a white gold shade with like a green shimmer running throughout it. So I would say just pick whatever shade like iridescent gold, green shifting shade you have in your collection, just get that. And then let me swatch that. And that's the shade. That dupes the shade Goldish. Beautiful, beautiful addition to that palette to like brighten up any of these like jewel tone shades or the inner corner highlight or like a face highlight. It'll work beautifully. Okay, now let's move on to the last shade of the palette, and it is called Wicked, and this is like a deep dark green shade, and it is like a very, very unique shade. I would say I only have like one shade which is very similar to that, and that is this shade, which is Desolate, again from the Giant Folds palette. So I would say if you do have the Giant Folds palette, you have quite a few shades from that, like similar to that palette, I would say. So I'm going to swatch this shade, which is Desolate. Very, very, very nice palette. You cannot find this palette anymore because it was like a limited edition palette. And also I want to mention that this palette that Battybean is creating with Shroud Cosmetics, it's not like a limited edition palette. It would be available till the time there is demand. Look how pretty that shade is. It's going to be like a very similar palette like her first release with Shroud Cosmetics. You can still find it because there is still demand for it. So she did mention that it's going to be very, very similar release to that. So as long as you want this palette, it would be available. It won't just like go out. So if this palette sells out, which I'm hoping, like I really think that this is going to sell out like on the first day, but they would bring it back again. So that is the entire palette swatched for you guys. I'm now going to show you in the outside lighting how all the swatches look, and it looks absolutely stunning and absolutely dimensional palette. And I think this color story is spectacular. Like I love the color story, and I cannot wait to put this on our eyes. So let's begin. Okay, let's start off with our pumpkin spice shade from the Latte palette. So I'm going to take like a big fluffy brush, dip that, and this is my BK Beauty's A503 brush. I'm going to take that mainly in the inner third, I would say, like that, and blend it across my crease as like my transitioning shade. Such a pretty shade. Now once you have that all across the eyelid, I'm going to take this same shade on my lower lash line too, just so that we have like a symmetry going on all throughout. So I'm just going to run it across my lower lash line too. Loving that. Okay, now I'm going to dip into this shade, which is Desolate from the palette. And let's take like a flat but a fluffy brush, and this I think is perfect for that. It is A501 from BK Beauty. I'm going to take this deep green shade, tap off the excess. I'm going to stamp it right there, and then do like a stamping motion which like blends it by itself. I absolutely love the shades in the Giant Folds palette, if you guys don't know. Like I use this palette pretty regularly, I would say. And then also on my lower lash line, but only on the outer corners, just like that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other eye. I'm going to take a smaller fluffy brush and I'm going to dip back into that pumpkin spice shade just to blend out the edges. And this is BK Beauty's A504. And I'm just going to blend out the edges so that there is like no harsh lines. Okay, now for the lid shade, I'm going to dip into this Potent shade from the Blend Bunny Primal palette, because I feel like that is screaming fall to me. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to apply that right here. Oh my God, look at that. And then just blend it with that green shade in the outer corners. So pretty, so pretty. And we can finesse the outer corner in just a minute. But I want to like stamp the shade in before we do something else. Okay, now I'm going to take the same brush with no additional product that we use this green with. And I'm just going to blend the edges. Just so that there's no harsh lines and there's like smooth transition between the two. And I love the combination of orange and green together. So I think it's looking very, very pretty. I'm going to take that shade. Where is it? The Giant Wolves palette shade, which is Astral, the iridescent shade. This one, I'm going to take it on the same brush and just stamp it around my inner corners and then just press it in. I'm going very, very lightly just because I don't want like an overdo of the thing, but I can build it. I'm going to take the same shade on my inner corners too. And once it like melts in with that orange, it looks so nice because once it mixes with the orange, it's gonna give more of that gold effect. And I think once you mix it with like that green, the green reflect will come through more. Now I'm just gonna finish off this eye with some liner and mascara and I'll get right back. So that's my final look. And let me know in the comment section below, are you interested in picking up this palette or do you have like the similar color story already in your collection? By the way, for my lips, I use my Jacqueline Cosmetics Feisty liquid lipstick. You guys let me know how I did like finding similar dupes from my collection. There are so many good like exciting releases for the palettes now, like coming right now. I'm so excited for so many things. But yes, if you did like this video, you know what to do. Do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and ring that notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post. Like, I generally upload 3 videos every single week, every Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.